what Trump basically did, Jack, is he said, okay, blockade. Good idea, but you're the wrong people blockading it. We're going to have a blockade, but we're going to borrow your idea that it's selective. So we're going to flip it upside down. You say nobody but pro-Iranian people can come in. We're going to say nobody but anti-Iranian are going to come in. So any ship, and they're going to have a problem with China because that's 80% of the ships coming in to get the oil will be Chinese. But they're going to have to turn back. That'll be explosive if they try to do it. I think eventually Trump will do it. And China will get angry, and we'll see what happens.
Iran tried to weaponize the Strait of Hormuz. Trump looked at that threat, flipped it upside down, and turned it into a blockade against Iran instead. That's not spin. That's the actual strategic move being described here, and it may be the most consequential economic weapon deployed in this entire campaign. What it means for Iran, for China, and for the world oil market is what this video is going to break down.
Well, I like that article because it was analytical and empirical. What he was saying were certain aspects that people had forgotten, that they are receiving in their aggregate income about, was it 430 something million a day, Jack, in oil, petrochemicals, and
just to say the collective economic damage.
Yes, collective.
Is that 435 million?
And you can see how, because there's everything they have, from washing machines to tires, that has to be imported. And you can stop everything if you control the Strait of Hormuz. And everybody talks about, well, they have the Caspian Sea or they have a port on the other side of the strait, like the Gulf of Oman. No, that he points out that those are very minuscule areas of oil export. The big enchilada is Karg Island. Unfortunately for the Iranians, it's way deep in the Persian Gulf. So they came up with the idea they want to blockade that, fine. And they say, we're only going to let pro-Iranian ships in, fine. But they don't have the wherewithal to enforce that. If they send out their narcotic-like PT boats, the warthogs, they can destroy them. If they try to blanket the Gulf states and Israel with missiles, Trump will lay the blow. He will take out their dual-use generation and stuff, and that will stop that very quickly. So what Trump basically did, Jack, is he said, okay, blockade. Good idea, but you're the wrong people blockading it. We're going to have a blockade, but we're going to borrow your idea that it's selective. So we're going to flip it upside down. You say nobody but pro-Iranian people can come in. We're going to say nobody but anti-Iranian are going to come in. So any ship, and they're going to have a problem with China because that's 80% of the ships coming in to get the oil will be Chinese. But they're going to have to turn back. That'll be explosive if they try to do it. I think eventually Trump will do it. And China will get angry, and we'll see what happens. But we have the wherewithal to stop it. And a couple of things are going to happen, as he points out. They don't have the storage capacity just to keep pumping oil and add it into Karg Island, big fuel storage depots, or into ships that are idle there. At some point, very quickly, in a matter of days, they're going to fill all those things up. And as he points out with oil wells, if you just shut them down, they have to be maintained and they get water seepage, and it's very hard and expensive to reboot.
Let's make sure the mechanics of what was just described are completely clear, because the financial picture here is more devastating to Iran than anything happening in the air campaign, and it's getting almost no coverage. Iran was pulling in roughly $435 million per day from oil, petrochemicals, and related exports. That number is not background context. That is the entire economic engine of the Iranian state. Everything that requires foreign currency, imported machinery, consumer goods, food, tires, washing machines, runs on that income stream. Cut the income, and you don't just create a budget shortfall. You create cascading shortages across an economy that was already on the edge of survival before the first bomb fell. Now here's where the geography becomes decisive. Iran's primary oil export terminal is Karg Island, sitting deep inside the Persian Gulf. The alternative export routes, ports on the Caspian Sea, facilities near the Gulf of Oman, are, as the analysis makes clear, marginal. They don't move meaningful volume. The world tends to think of Iran as having geographic flexibility with its oil exports. It doesn't. Karg Island is the choke point, and Karg Island is inside a body of water that the United States currently controls. Iran's response to this situation was to announce a blockade, declaring that only pro-Iranian ships would be permitted to transit the area. The problem is, they lack the military capability to enforce it. Their small naval assets, the fast attack boats, the patrol craft, are matched against American warthogs and naval firepower that can destroy them within minutes of engagement. If Iran sends missiles at Gulf states or Israel in response to the economic pressure, the consequence, as described here, is that Trump escalates directly against their power generation infrastructure. The threat is self-canceling. Iran announced a policy it cannot execute without triggering a response it cannot survive. And so, Trump did exactly what the segment describes. He borrowed the concept, inverted it, and implemented it on American terms. The blockade now runs the other way. Ships coming in to collect Iranian oil, 80% of them Chinese, are being told to turn back. Iran's oil stays in storage tanks and aboard idle vessels anchored in the Gulf. And here is where the technical reality of oil production becomes Iran's second, slower catastrophe. You cannot simply pause an oil well and come back to it later. If storage fills and production has nowhere to go, the wells must be shut down. Shutting down oil wells is not like turning off a tap. It invites water seepage into the reservoir. It requires expensive maintenance just to keep the equipment viable. Restarting production after a shutdown is technically demanding and costly, and Iran, already unable to afford food imports, is in no position to absorb those costs. The economic damage being inflicted is not a short-term revenue interruption. It is structural degradation of Iran's core productive capacity. Every day the blockade holds, the long-term recovery timeline extends. The port infrastructure compounds this further. Iran is not diversified like Saudi Arabia or the UAE, which have invested in Red Sea pipelines and Gulf of Oman facilities precisely to reduce Strait dependence. Iran's eggs are almost entirely in the Karg Island basket. The Saudis have alternatives. The Emiratis have alternatives. They've been building them for years, partly in anticipation of exactly this kind of disruption. Iran has not. The comparative infrastructure investment decisions of the last 2 decades have left Tehran uniquely exposed to a sustained blockade, in a way its Gulf neighbors are not. The oil market dimension is also important here. Iran's leverage has always rested on the assumption that its exports are indispensable, that the global economy cannot absorb their removal without catastrophic price increases. That assumption is being actively dismantled. Russian oil is heading towards ceasefire conditions that could bring it back to full market capacity. Venezuelan output is increasing. American production has room to expand. The supply alternatives exist, and they are being mobilized. Iran's threat to hold the world economy hostage via the Strait of Hormuz depended on there being no credible substitute. There is increasingly a credible substitute, and Iran's leverage dissolves in proportion to how available that substitute becomes. What the segment is ultimately describing is a form of economic warfare that compounds the military campaign, not as a follow-on phase, but as a simultaneous operation that accelerates the internal pressure on the Iranian government faster than the bombs alone could accomplish.
The Saudis now export most of their oil to the Red Sea. If the Houthis get orders to stop it, well, Trump bombed them for 56 days. And the Israelis and the Americans can shut down their power, their water, everything if they try that. They're going to build probably another pipeline to the Red Sea. They're talking about building one across the desert through Jordan to Haifa or near Jerusalem. They're talking about expanding the one that already exists in the Gulf of Oman, where you could get the oil before you got near the strait. And at the same time, they think that nobody will touch their oil because it's critical to the world price. Maybe, maybe not, 1 or 2 million barrels a day. But Ukraine and Russia are talking about a ceasefire. You put Russian oil at full capacity on the market. You put Venezuela, which is increasing every day a little bit, their oil output, and Trump says he's going to have another 1 million barrels. You could say to the Iranians, as long as your regime is in power, you're not going to export any oil. Not today, not 6 months from now, and the world economy would make the necessary adjustments, is what the writer is saying. So he's basically, I think he's basically telling us that it's a political It's a political challenge to Donald Trump. They have counted on the left to embolden them. So their strategy is to indulge in a crude stereotype of the middle. They want to do a rug deal, and they want to barter and barter and barter and feign anger and back and forth, and they want to draw that out for 3 to 4 to 5 months. And they want the economy to stall, the world economy, and then they want the left to come in and take the House and take the Senate and cut off funds and stop the war. I don't think that's going to happen. That's their strategy. But what he's trying to argue is that strategy requires a quiet population that can be intimidated, as it is now, but permanently so, and it requires some economic viability to survive. And they're already can't afford food, they can't afford gas, they're under attack, they've lost probably $500 million, $500 billion in weapons and infrastructure that was accrued over 47 years. They can't rebuild that, and they can't give money to the Arab terrorists that there are 4 proxies, 5 proxies in Syria and Iraq and Lebanon and Gaza and Yemen, without angering further the population. And as I said in this article, it's one thing to tell the population, well, you don't like us, but we restored the Iranian credibility. Everybody's afraid of us. We're the terror master. And now the people are saying, no, you're not the terror masters of the Middle East. You're a paper tiger. You're buffoons. They've wiped you out. We're going down the toilet with you. This is what you did. Nobody's afraid of you anymore. You're a bunch of clowns. That is fatal to a dictatorship, to be humiliated and to be an object of ridicule. So he points all of that out, I think, quite successfully, as did Michael Duran, who always has important things to say. He says 7 myths about the Iranian war. So I guess to sum up, the left is in a bubble, and it's all frenzied because Trump is under such criticism by Tucker Carlson or Megyn Kelly or Candace Owens, and they say, oh, the MAGA movement's blowing apart, and everybody's saying it's lost. And they don't look at the situation. They don't look at the actual, it's the most asymmetrical war in memory, and Trump can adjudicate when it starts and when it ends. And if he wants to take up the Iranian challenge, it'll be very interesting when American warships go through there and they've completely demined the area this week, and tankers follow them, and they start to bring in those little mosquito boats and see what happens. I think you'll see a whole fleet of warthogs in the air, and they will blast them out of the water, and I think they will hit any missile within 2 or 3 minutes. They'll know where it was launched. They'll take that out, but they're not going to stop there. They're going to tell them, okay, you're broke now. You've got $400 million in economic damage plus per day. Wait till you don't have any power, and that will really shake up things. And somebody said, well, that would be inhumane. Well, then talk to Bill Clinton, because he shut down the power grid at Belgrade almost for a day or two every week he did. And talk to Barack Obama. He shut down television stations in Libya. He shut down the ports. He tried to do a lot of stuff, which he said he didn't do. So there's a long tradition of dual-use targeting.
Yeah. I mean, outside of war, we shut down the United States during COVID.
I would say something more controversial. I really like the Wall Street Journal, but I'm getting very, very disappointed. I look at the headline stories in the news section, and I can't distinguish them from the New York Times. It's all doom and gloom. Trump did this, and this is this. Then I'd say to myself, at least the editorial page, I really like Dan Henninger, Barton Swaim, is that it? He's very,
Barton Swaim.
Yeah, he's
Don't forget Bill McGurn.
Yeah, but I love Bill McGurn. I like Holman Jenkins, Kimberly, of course. But today, Gerald Baker, whom I really like him. He's a very brilliant guy, but he has succumbed to the pessimism of the news stories. And he's basically saying the war is lost or it's not going well. And it's just anti-empirical to say that, given the great difference in damage. I can see that he's upset with Trump's exclamations, but that doesn't disguise the fact that we've done so much damage to this Iranian military, and the economic damage hasn't even taken its full toll yet, but it's now at a crisis point, and they know it, and that's why they wanted to negotiate.
Yeah,
and their
inflation is nearly 50% there.
They're broke, and everybody said it was a brilliant. Nobody imagined they would close it. Now they knew they were going to try that, but they don't have the naval facilities to close it. Not against the U.S. Navy, and all they're going to do is say, well, we're going to close it. And the Americans said, well, we weren't going to do that, but because you gave us the idea, or you think it's okay, we'll do it. But none of your friends are coming in, and all of your enemies are, and they're all going to get oil from the Arab exporters, but they're not going to get any from you.
The Iranian strategy, as described in that segment, is not military. It hasn't been military for weeks. Their military is gone. Their strategy now is political, and it is explicitly built around the American domestic calendar. The plan is to drag out negotiations for 3 to 4 months, sustain enough economic disruption to keep pressure on the world economy, and wait for the midterm political environment to shift against Trump. Hope that the left takes the House and the Senate. Hope that funding gets cut. Hope that domestic opposition becomes loud enough to force an exit before the aims are fully consolidated. That is the Iranian endgame right now, not victory. Survival until the American political climate changes. Understanding that strategy is the key to understanding why the framing of this war in left-wing media is so important to Tehran. Every "the war is lost" headline is a tactical asset for the Iranian government. Every Tucker Carlson segment declaring failure, every Megyn Kelly commentary on MAGA fracture, every pessimistic Wall Street Journal news page that has become indistinguishable from the New York Times. These are not just domestic political noise. They are inputs into the Iranian calculation about whether they can outlast the political will in Washington. The media environment is part of the battlefield, and the Iranian government is reading it carefully. The internal dimension is what makes this particularly fragile for Tehran. The regime's legitimacy was always partly built on the claim that it had made Iran feared and respected, the terror master of the Middle East, the power that Gulf monarchies tiptoed around, the government that could threaten Diego Garcia and target American officials on their own soil. That claim is finished. The population is not mourning the military losses. They are drawing the obvious conclusion. The government that spent their standard of living on proxy armies and missile programs just watched all of it destroyed in weeks. The humiliation is not just strategic. It is existential for a dictatorship, because a dictatorship that can no longer command fear or respect has nothing left to offer. The blockade closing, the element that everybody assumed Iran would attempt and nobody thought they'd be able to sustain, has been flipped entirely. American warships are demining the strait. Tankers are following. And if Iranian fast attack boats try to interfere, the response is already in the air. The economic siege is tightening, not loosening. And the negotiating posture from Tehran, whatever its public language, reflects a government that knows it is running out of time, money, and options. The long view says this is close to over.